To more domestic matters, in an exclusive interview by Stand Up Be Counted contributors, the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, said that he was partly responsible for the rowdy behaviour seen during PMQs, Prime Minister's Question Times, every Wednesday. So, does the weekly session need reforming? Well, joined down from Westminster by two of our Stand Up Be Counted panel members, the writer Ray Filar and the Conservative District Counsellor William Hall. Very good evening to you both. Sorry to keep you waiting. There's been rather a lot of breaking news around tonight. But to the issue of the Commons, PMQs today as rowdy and noisy as ever, despite what John Bercow had been telling your friends and colleagues on the Stand Up Be Counted panel. So, Ray, what do you make of it? Is it just what Britain deserves as a democracy, or does it need tidying up?
PMQs is a total joke, and it's not just because it's a pantomime of public schoolboys braying at each other, and it's not just because it pretends to be a democratic form of accountability, but more because it's a distraction from the very real damage that the coalition government's policies are doing to people across the country. If this is the best we have, then I think that that's a sham, and we really need to be asking questions about how we can do better.
So, William Hall, how does that strike you? Is that add up to where we are now, or do you think the adversarial system that has been in the Commons for decades now really works and serves the people of this country?
I think it absolutely does. I mean, for a start, we have one of the only systems in the world where the head of our government is challenged on a weekly basis about the policies he's pursuing. And if Ray has an issue with the fact we've created 2 million new jobs and the huge number of apprentices and lifting people out of work, then she should think that David Cameron coming to the dispatch box once a week and answering questions that are put to them by members of Parliament is a good thing.
So, Ray, I was just going to say, the Prime Minister being held to account, that seems pretty key, doesn't it?
I think it's not really a form of accountability when the questions are planted by whips, as we know is very often the case. It's also not a very real form of accountability when you can't get your question across because of all these whiny man-babies braying and jeering at each other across an aisle. There's not really very much political opposition being provided by the supposedly opposing parties. Just because they sit opposite each other shouting doesn't mean they're offering anything substantially different.
But the leader of the opposition does have a chance to get stuck in on a weekly basis, and he does get a chance to ask some pretty serious questions.
But it's more about political point scoring than actually addressing the issues at hand. And as to what Will is saying about the Conservatives creating new jobs, we know we've got a record amount of unemployment. We know that the welfare state has been decimated by Conservative Party policies about scroungers and benefits this and benefits that, which is pure ideology.
But that's your political view on that.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Get back to what's on the floor of the House. Yeah. If it doesn't work, what do you replace it with?
I think we need to find a way for there to be a forum in which members of the public can hold our politicians to account. And that might mean something like members of the public putting questions directly to politicians, but it also might mean something much broader about people being able to participate in democracy in a more holistic sense.
William, there's no doubt that it does put a lot of people off, doesn't it?
Well, actually, the recent Hansard Society report showed that about half people have a positive opinion, half don't. So when Speaker Bercow talks about that, but actually, when it comes down to it, I mean, Ray's saying that members of Parliament should be asking questions on behalf of the people they represent. They already do, and I think she's focusing solely on the issues when it's Ed Miliband talking to David Cameron and ignoring the mess of the time, the majority of the time, 25% of it, 25 minutes of a half-hour session, where backbench MPs are raising issues directly on the record with the Prime Minister, and we're one of the only places in the world that does that, and that's why countless people across the world tune in to watch democracy at its most purest, which is when the head of our government, the person who's leading our country, is challenged by the ordinary people who represent us. I think that's a good thing.
What I'm saying, Will, is that members of the public should be able to ask questions of the politicians directly.
So it's democracy
and that's not
by
what we
social
have.
media, is it?
Democracy by participation. And there's all sorts of forms of participation that could be written into the way we do democracy. If Will genuinely thinks that the best kind of democracy that we could possibly have is a load of people shouting at each other so that the Speaker, as we've seen earlier, has to shout order, order every 5 minutes, well, I think that's a joke. And I don't really think you believe it either.
Well, I clearly do, because I think it's a very good system that allows people to get their views across. But I have to say to Ray, she began by saying that
when they're getting shouted down.
I've got to say, I think it's interesting that someone is not letting me speak when they're arguing for a better system of debate. But when she was saying that it was a male-dominated environment, I mean, Margaret Thatcher was the absolute champion at PMQs, and and obviously she wasn't a public school male in the slightest. So I think actually it is a good forum. People are passionate, our politicians are passionate about what they're talking about, and it's up to the speaker to do a better job of reining them in if he needs to. But the premise, the idea of having our head of government to be held to account is a good one, and I'm surprised that Ray doesn't want that to continue.
Order in the House. I'm going to have to leave it there. Ray and William, delightful talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching Sky News.